大家好，歡迎收睇2024年最後一集兩邊走走。2024年即將過去，轉眼香港由疫情復常已經差唔多2年，反修例社會運動亦都已經係5年前嘅事。
回顧呢一段時間，香港出現各種嘅變化。如果話我哋對香港呢啲轉變曾經抱有好多疑問，唔知道香港會變成點樣，或者投射各種期盼，希望仍然可以保留住一啲自己認為重要嘅部分。2024年可以話係一個故事其中一個段落嘅完結。
喺呢一年入面，唔少延續多年嘅事態發展已經塵埃落定，同時展示咗一個不能迴避嘅現實，就係香港嘅改變已經深入到根本，深入到結構。呢一個地方已經走上一條同以往完全唔同嘅軌跡。
Last December, Hong Kong's retail industry still hoped for recovery within a year to a year and a half after the pandemic. But through 2024, with declining tourist spending and a persistent trend of local residents shopping across the border, the anticipated recovery in retail sales did not materialize. In the first 10 months of 2024, total retail sales value fell by 7.1% year on year. The downturn in the property market from 2023 continued into 2024 with no improvement. In February, the Financial Secretary faced reality and announced in the budget the removal of additional stamp duties on residential property transactions. However, the property market saw only 2 months of mild recovery. By year-end, the market remained sluggish. In October, the government relaxed mortgage caps and the debt-to-income ratio. This stabilized the property market slightly by year-end. But the persistent downturn had already shattered the shared belief that property investment ensures value retention. With diminished confidence in the property market's prospects, developers showed even less interest in bidding for government land, dealing a severe blow to government revenues. In the 2023-24 fiscal year, land sales revenue was only 19.4 billion Hong Kong dollars, less than 1/4 of the expected 85 billion Hong Kong dollars. For 2024-25, the government's estimate was already conservative at 33 billion Hong Kong dollars. But as of November, land sales revenue totaled only 1.7 billion Hong Kong dollars, including lease modifications and land exchanges. The total revenue reached 3.7 billion Hong Kong dollars, a mere 10% of the annual estimate. The widening gap between actual and projected land revenue shows land sales are no longer a reliable income source for the Hong Kong government.
受地緣政局同埋全球經濟增長放緩等因素影響，今年香港資產市場仍然受壓，影響咗政府喺賣地、樓市印花稅同埋利得稅等嘅收入。喺計及發行債券收入同埋償還到期嘅款項後，初步估算2024-25年度嘅綜合赤字喺1000億元上下，高於今年預算案時預計嘅481億元。
To fill the revenue gap, the government issued 72.5 billion Hong Kong dollars in bonds last fiscal year, and plans to issue another 120 billion Hong Kong dollars this fiscal year. This reliance on debt for revenue is likely to continue for years. Fiscal reserves have fallen to 570 billion Hong Kong dollars. Despite efforts to go all out for the economy since the 2023 policy address, Hong Kong remains trapped in economic stagnation. The public sees a reality: the government is powerless to revive the economy. The much publicized mega-event economy has yielded little tangible benefit for tourism and consumption. Efforts to promote family offices highlighted by the farcical Dubai Prince Ali incident, ended in embarrassment. Buzzwords like omnipresent tourism, new productivity, panda economy, and low-altitude economy are as repetitive and empty as the slogan governance leading to prosperity.
我都冇乜良策㗎啦，即係我成日都話政府又冇，我都冇，因為政府唔識做生意嘅。佢最緊要就係整好個營商環境俾我哋。咁但係成個而家得唔得啊？而家營商環境？而家營商環境係唔得，但係佢最緊要唔好搞壞我哋嘅營商環境。
改革時The theme of the 2024 policy address is reform. Regarding the government's role in economic reform, Chief Executive John Lee expressed,
整體宏觀嚟講，成個香港係有增長嘅。咁增長嘅過程裏邊，有啲人增長多啲，有啲人未必有增長。呢個係經濟轉型期。咁喺經濟轉型期裏邊呢，就有更替、有轉變，係一個轉型期裏邊出現嘅正常現象。政府嘅責任係咩呢？清晰話俾大家聽，現在就是轉型期。如果你嘅行業裏邊面對一啲挑戰，你就要去嘗試去改革下自己，進步自己。呢個係第一，政府指明方向嘅責任。第二，政府如果政策可以幫到佢，就會做。
Despite shrinking revenues and a growing deficit, the Hong Kong government has not reduced its investments aligned with mainland China's national strategies. In 2024, the government invested 62 billion Hong Kong dollars in the wholly state-owned Hong Kong Investment Corporation Limited, focusing on AI, semiconductors, and new energy, key priorities set by Beijing. Details of these investments, including project lists, reasons for investing in these companies, amounts, partnerships, expected outlook and returns, remain undisclosed to the public and Legislative Council, citing confidentiality agreements. Meanwhile, development plans for the Northern Metropolis and artificial islands under the Lantau Tomorrow continue unabated, despite fiscal concerns raised by pro-establishment figures like Henry Tang and C.Y. Leung. For the first time, the government introduced mainland-style risk-sharing development models, pressuring developers to bear more risks. Business sentiment remains lukewarm. In November, Xiao Baolong, director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, summoned 29 key business representatives to Shenzhen. They were asked to disclose their current and future investments in Hong Kong, and were directed to demonstrate patriotism and love for Hong Kong and jointly building a better Hong Kong. John Lee later urged businesses to consider their contributions not just as commercial decisions, but as expressions of love for their home.
香港工商界应当当好局中人，不做旁观者，主动参与特区政府的4点措施，同心同行，建机制、搭平台、推项目，携手开创北部都会区发展新局面。
Asked all enterprise representatives to sign the MOU.
Later, John Lee further mobilized developers, banks and construction firms, along with dozens of local and state-owned enterprises, to publicly support the Northern Metropolis Development Plan by signing letters of intent. Hong Kong, a global leader in economic freedom, has long adhered to free market principles in its business operations. This time, it is unprecedented for the government to take the lead in mobilization and tie political declarations to business decisions. With this precedent set, will planned economic practices gradually emerge in Hong Kong? How should corporations, shareholders, investors, and the public reassess the risks involved?
特區政府喺刺激經濟上面未見成績，咁但係執行23條立法呢，就有截然不同嘅驚人效率。
睇返2002年9月，特區政府第一次推動23條立法，引發跟住嗰年，即係2003年7·1 50萬人遊行，港府撤回草案，立法21年懸而未決。今年特區政府只係用咗唔夠2個月嘅時間，就完成咗成個立法程序啦。
除咗23條嘅立法，幾宗受人關注、纏繞咗幾年、牽涉國家安全嘅案件，亦都喺今年審結。各種保障國家安全嘅法規都就位，案件爭拗亦都得到咗定調。
係咪代表香港近年嘅政治風波終於告一段落，成個社會就係咁樣可以重新上路啦
？At the end of January 2024, the government launched a one-month consultation on Article 23 legislation. This included the long Lunar New Year holiday. A day after the consultation ended, the government announced that 98.64% of written opinions supported the legislation. A few days later, on March the 8th, the Safeguarding National Security Bill under Article 23 of the Basic Law was gazetted. The Legislative Council immediately convened for the first and second readings. That afternoon, a Bills Committee meeting was held. Some lawmakers attending meetings in Beijing returned to Hong Kong to join the legislative process. Many details of the bill were only revealed during the Bills Committee discussions. After 7 consecutive days of meetings, a special Legislative Council session was held on March 19th. The session lasted 10 hours to resume the second reading debate and pass the third reading.
現在嘅待決議題係維護國家安全條例草案，予以二讀。贊成嘅請舉手。有89人出席，有89位贊成，全票通過。我宣布議案獲得通過。
我感謝所有愛國愛港人士支持同埋推動基本法第23條立法，共同為纏繞香港26年8個月零19日嘅問題寫上圓滿嘅句號。
The process from consultation to passage took only 51 days. Under patriots governing Hong Kong, the Safeguarding National Security Ordinance was swiftly passed in the Legislative Council. After the passage of the ordinance, the Secretary for Security invoked the ordinance in June to impose restriction measures authorized by the ordinance on Nathan Law, Christopher Mung, Fin Lau, Simon Cheng, Johnny Fok, and Tony Choi, 6 overseas Hong Kongers issued with arrest warrants who had been accused of endangering national security. This year, at least 3 cases prosecuted under the law were concluded, all involving sedition charges. These included wearing clothing with the slogan "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times" in public, publishing social media posts containing message like "Rebellion is justified," writing phrases such as "Hong Kong Independence," "Liberate Hong Kong," 721 incident on bus seats. Sentences range from 10 to 14 months of imprisonment. One defendant stated in court that his actions were meant to test whether freedom of speech still existed after Article 23. In fact, even before the enactment of Article 23, the definition of freedom in Hong Kong had already undergone a fundamental change, following the implementation of the National Security Law. 2 landmark national security cases, the Stand News case and the 47 pro-democracy figures case, were concluded this year. The rulings established new boundaries for freedoms and rights in Hong Kong. Lasting nearly 2 years, the Stand News case, involving charges of conspiracy to publish or reproduce seditious publications, was decided in August and sentenced in September. The parent company of Stand News, former chief editor Chung Poi-kun and acting editor Patrick Lam, were found guilty. Chung was sentenced to 21 months and Lam to 11 months. Having been detained for nearly a year, Chung has 9.5 months left to serve, while Lam was released immediately. Justice Kwok Wai Kin, designated under the National Security Law, wrote in his judgment that even if different media report on the same event or topics, variations in reporting methods, styles, content, or intent can lead to different outcomes. He ruled that 11 out of 17 articles involved in the case incited hatred against the central or Hong Kong governments. Based on Stand News's founding statement, Hong Kong is the stage of Hong Kongers. Defending our stage is our unyielding stance. Kwok concluded that Stand News opposed the government and had criminal intent. He ruled that Stand News was not a neutral news organization, but a participant in protests. The government emphasized that the ruling did not undermine freedom of the press or speech. However, the intent behind news and speech has become a new red line. The 47 defendants' case began in early 2021. After over 3 years, judgments were delivered in May and sentencing in November this year. 45 defendants were found guilty of conspiracy to subvert state power under the national security law. 4 were labeled principal offenders and sentenced to 6 years and 1 month to 10 years. The remaining 41 were classified as active participants. Of these, 14 who pleaded not guilty were sentenced to 6 years and 1 month to 7 years and 9 months. The other 27 who pleaded guilty received sentences of 4 years and 2 months to 5 years and 7 months. 2 defendants, Lawrence Lau and Lee Yu-shun, were acquitted of all charges, though the government has appealed the acquittal of Lawrence Lau. The key controversy in the case: if the defendants win a majority of seats in the Legislative Council, they plan to collectively veto the budget using powers granted under the Basic Law. How does this constitute subversion of state power? The National Security Law designated judges Andrew Chan, Alex Lee, and Johnny Chan stated that indiscriminately vetoing the budget to force the government to respond to the 5 demands violates the Legislative Council's functions as outlined in the Basic Law and has been inconsistent with the requirement to uphold the Basic Law and pledge allegiance to the Hong Kong SAR. The judgment also stated that the defendants' actions prior to the enactment of the National Security Law on July 1, 2020, did not constitute a crime. However, when evaluating the severity, scope, and roles of the defendants in the conspiracy, the court could not disregard facts or circumstances from before the prosecution period. Does the judge's statement suggest that the rights explicitly protected under the Basic Law have now been redefined by the National Security Law? These rulings prompted rare criticism from the judiciary. In early June, Lord Sumption, a former overseas non-permanent judge of Hong Kong's Court of Final Appeal, resigned and wrote an article in the Financial Times. He directly criticized the court's conviction of the 47 defendants' case, stating it undermined the constitutional power of the Legislative Council to oppose the budget, and highlighted the rule of law in Hong Kong is in grave danger. Many judges, he asserted, had lost sight of their traditional role as defenders of the liberty of the subject. He resigned, citing his inability to help uphold Hong Kong's rule of law. He described the regime's crackdown on the pro-democracy camp as obsessive. Pro-establishment figures, official media, hardline lawmakers, and government officials collectively created an oppressive atmosphere and an intense wave of political turmoil. In December, former legislator Lam Cheuk Ting and 6 others were convicted of rioting in the 2019 Yuen Long 721 case, with sentencing set for early next year. Presiding Judge Stanley Chan did not accept Lam Cheuk Ting's claim of acting as an independent observer to mediate the conflict in his role as a lawmaker. He also rejected the argument that the actions of the other 6 defendants at Yuen Long Station were acts of self-defense, protecting others or preventing crime. Chan's ruling noted that 2 riots occurred that day, one in the Yuen Long Station concourse, the first part, and another on the platform, the second part. The public is more familiar with the second part due to videos featuring Lam Cheuk Ting and others. The 7 defendants were convicted of rioting related to the events in the concourse, that is, the first part. Chan emphasized in his closing remarks that no one should speculate or view the police's actions that night through a lens of conspiracy theories without evidence. However, the court's ruling did not address parts of the 7/21 Yuen Long incident, known as the riot before the riot, or the events after the riot. Public controversy over these aspects remains unresolved. The court's judgment serves as the official record. Can this 2019 incident, which drove societal divisions to their peak, now be resolved? In fact, some voices in Hong Kong's political sphere hope society can move past the oppressive political atmosphere and start anew. It has now been 5 years since the anti-extradition protests, with over 10,000 people arrested. This year, some were convicted over 4 years after the incident. More than 6,000 arrested individuals remain unprosecuted. Former Executive Council convener Bernard Chan has called on businesses to hire young people with past convictions to help heal societal divisions.
經過2019年係冇一個正式一個修補衝突嘅過程嘅，唔去講其實背後好多嘅問題係未真正有機會去抒發得出嚟嘅。
Former Transport and Housing Secretary Anthony Cheung suggested the government could drop charges against unprosecuted individuals if evidence is insufficient, effectively drawing a line under the issue. However, Secretary for Justice Paul Lam countered that the 6,000 individuals can continue their lives unaffected. Serious criminal cases have no statute of limitations, and drawing a line contradicts legal and rule of law principles. Security Secretary Chris Tang argued that drawing a line would effectively legalize illegal actions.
因為你犯咗法，我要時間去取證㗎嘛，係嘛？咁我幾時有證據，我咪有幾時去拉你咯。
國安法實施23條立法，對於好多人嚟講，可能認為對自己嘅影響唔大，生活如常。
不過，隨住香港政府將國家安全呢一個概念變成全個社會嘅焦點，其實已經帶嚟日常生活之中各種各樣嘅轉變。經過幾年嘅累積，形成一整套新嘅香港社會常態，每一個人生活喺香港都要面對。
被捕人士涉嫌咧係用一個匿名嘅方式，係透過一個咧社交嘅專業，利用咧係嚟緊一個特別嘅日子嚟到咧係連續發布一啲係意圖係煽動嘅貼文。
June 4th is no longer just a taboo date in mainland China. This year, Secretary for Security Chris Tang also referred to it as a special day. When pressed by reporters, he further described it as a sensitive day. Meanwhile, the Highways Department was found to have reassigned numbers for streetlights originally labelled 8964 and 6489, replacing them with other combinations. In June, during a World Cup qualifier featuring Hong Kong's football team, police officers recorded the crowd during the national anthem. 2 spectators were arrested for not standing, and another for turning his head away, all on suspicion of violating the national anthem ordinance. In November, a 19-year-old male was officially charged with insulting the national anthem. In September, Hong Kong's new school year began, with the Life and Society curriculum replaced by the Citizen, Economics and Society, Secondary 1 to 3. The Education Bureau's new curriculum guidelines, for the first time, reference China's patriotic education law and require teaching Xi Jinping's thoughts to Form 3 students. Previously, mandatory topics in Life and Society such as global citizenship awareness and international political order have been removed. The number of important days for schools to hold national education activities has been increased from 13 per academic year in 2021 to 27 this year. On average, schools must organize 3 activities per month. These important days include the anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party, the PLA Army Day, the anniversary of the National Security Law enactment, and National Security Education Day, and so on. The Education Bureau released evaluation reports for 20 schools this year, with some addressing national and national security education. 3 special schools for intellectually disabled students were criticized, including claims that some students did not sing the national anthem loudly enough. The schools were commented to have made slow progress in national security education, raising questions about the importance placed on national security for intellectually disabled students. In July, the Legislative Council passed amendments to the Social Workers Registration Ordinance, submitted by the Labour and Welfare Bureau in May. The amendments allowed the government to quickly restructure the Social Workers Registration Board within 2 months. Board members increased from 15 to 27, while the proportion of elected members dropped from over half to 30%. The remaining members are now entirely appointed by the government. Under the new amendments, social workers convicted of serious crimes, such as endangering national security, will face permanent disqualification without the right to appeal.
標誌住社工註冊局咧係可以重回正軌，佢嘅運作、佢嘅決定都可以時刻以公眾利益為依歸，同埋咧係保障國家安全。
A survey conducted before the amendments showed 95% of social work respondents found the changes inappropriate. Concerns were also raised on the increased risk of social workers being accused of endangering national security while performing their duties. Additionally, nearly 90% believed the amendments would make it harder for social workers to advocate for the rights of vulnerable groups. The Hong Kong Drama Awards 2023, organized by the Hong Kong Federation of Drama Societies, was accused in January by the Hong Kong Arts Development Council, the HKADC, of damaging its reputation and had its funding withdrawn. The Leisure and Cultural Services Department, the LCSD, also stopped sponsoring venues. The Federation therefore self-funded the awards this year, hosting it at a restaurant in Wan Chai. This became the 32nd Hong Kong Drama Awards. In December, the HKADC and LCSD again refused to fund the Federation. They stated the decision followed established procedures but gave no reasons. Last year, the HKADC stated when denying funding that public funds must be used with particular caution, with a duty to minimize risks of violating local and national security laws.
而家仍在寒冬，仍然需要各位嘅支持，去辦好下一屆嘅頒獎典禮。只當謀求自力更生之道，自求多福。
Also cut from the HKADC funding this year was the Fresh Wave International Short Film Festival. Since 2021, several Fresh Wave entries have been denied screening approval by the Film Censorship Authority. In the last edition, some films were required to be censored by the authority. the censored content often related to social movements or political stances. Beyond actions by the government or public institutions, there is also a form of force majeure in society, targeting individuals or organizations deemed anti-China and destabilizing Hong Kong. It aims to restrict their space for social activities. Singer Pong Nan's concert, originally scheduled for early January 2025, was cancelled about a month before the show by written notice from the West Kowloon Cultural District. The notice cancelled his venue booking. Before this, an online campaign emerged, claiming Pong Nan had expressed support for social movements. He was labelled as an anti-China and destabilizing artist. The campaign called for complaints to various government departments and the West Kowloon Management Authority. Such incidents have become more frequent in recent years. In 2024 alone, there were several cases. The band Colors concert, originally scheduled for December, had its venue booking cancelled by the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre in November. The Hong Kong Journalists Association fundraising concert, planned for April, also faced venue cancellation. The event was postponed and moved online. Tickets for all three events were nearly sold out. The cancellations were not for commercial reasons. As early as January this year, the non-profit arts group Fire Makes Us Human had its members reported for making inappropriate remarks in 2019. The Education Bureau's Kowloon City District Section requested the HKICC Lee Shao Ki School of Creativity terminate its venue rental agreement with the troupe. This resulted in the cancellation of 2 scheduled performances in February. In July, Denise Ho held a live-stream concert at the now-closed Mount Zero bookstore. The police, citing noise complaints, deployed over 10 officers to cordon off the site. The on-site commander claimed that even though the concert was indoors, there was sound leaking out, requiring investigation. Officers entered the bookstore several times for questioning. The concert had to be paused repeatedly. Mount Zero Bookstore, an independent bookstore that closed on March 31st this year, was frequently targeted with anonymous complaints to government departments. It received weekly warning letters from these departments. Eventually, Mount Zero chose to close down. Other independent bookstores faced ongoing scrutiny by various departments this past year. During events held by some bookstores, the police or FEHD officers arrived to request participant lists. They even demanded the immediate suspension of events. At the July book fair, at least 8 books were ordered by the organizer, HKTDC, to be removed, taken off display, and stopped from being sold. These included books on travel and journalistic ethics. HKTDC claimed it acted on complaints following established procedures, but they did not disclose the nature of the complaints or what issues were with the books. The targeted activities did not violate any laws, yet complaints were acted on without investigation or discussion. Government departments and institutions swiftly acted on the complaints. The objective outcome was that the rights of targeted individuals or groups were not protected by the government. Their space for social activities was unfairly taken away. Such suppression has escalated to harassment and even intimidation. In November, the independent bookstore Have a Nice Day held a travel book sharing event by the author Pazu. A group of self-proclaimed patriots showed up to harass the event. After being asked to leave, they continued to harass participants downstairs, holding banners. The Hong Kong Journalists Association, the HKJA, and the Democratic Party have both publicly revealed that members, their families, and even their family members' employers received emails from self-proclaimed patriots, along with harassment via letters and messaging apps. The messages accused members of being anti-China, destabilizing Hong Kong, and probably violating national security laws. They also warned that their families or companies could be implicated. The HKJA reported receiving messages that included threats to personal safety.
係咪香港已經發展到係一個咁嘅社會？即係你就公開條話俾我哋知啦，即係你做正事咧，就係會搞到你屋企人嘅，會搞到你嘅公司嘅，係咪要咁樣咧？即係如果係咁嘅話 ，OK， 咁你咪清清楚楚講咯，咁大家重新考慮啦。
The harassers in these incidents seem to have access to a lot of private personal information about their targets. Where is this information coming from? Is this broad-reaching force majeure backed by organization and coordination? When the opposition is silenced, even dissenting voices within the pro-establishment camp may become the only opposing voices, and they too may become targets of suppression.
執法人員呢就日夜繽紛贈慶咁抄牌啦，便衣潛伏會捉無嚴格遵守規則過馬路嘅市民啦，重罰食肆阻街嘅或者全天候車輪戰一啲打擊書店啦，同埋啲工廠大廈食堂等等嘅高調高壓嘅執法行為，加上呢觀感上呢，俾部分嘅香港市民覺得政府嘅施政作風呢有親冇納稅嘅小紅書帳戶，係遠真正要納稅嘅香港人。醖釀官民矛盾社會氣氛咧，就令到市民咧覺得心情嘅繃緊啦、沉重啦、冇癮啦。
剛才有啲用詞咧更加危險嘅，令我想起咧2019年黑暴嘅時候咧，經常咧呢軟對抗同埋反動力量所用嘅形容詞咧，呢啲我睇到有再出現嘅矛頭咧，我哋即刻就要打擊佢，就要即刻制止佢，唔好助長佢。
During the consultation period for Article 23 legislation, Jasper Jang wrote an article advising the government to avoid suppressing negative opinions with a confrontational mindset. He also raised several questions about the details of Article 23 legislation. This prompted FTU lawmaker Jofi Chan to post a video response, criticizing Zhang's views as chilling. The video was titled, "Is Jasper Jang rebelling at a critical moment?" Any criticism of policies quickly prompts emotional responses or personal attacks from the pro-government camp. Such critics are labeled as bad-mouthing Hong Kong. In newspapers and online platforms, rational discussions on social issues are becoming rare. The space for opinions outside the government's narrative is shrinking. Even a TV program highlighting the suffering of Ukrainians amid war can no longer exist in Hong Kong society. These phenomena reveal that Hong Kong's core values are under threat. At a youth forum hosted by the Hong Kong government this year, Raymond Tam, former Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs and current HKJC Corporate Affairs Executive Director, openly promoted the idea that knowing people is better than being educated.
We are increasingly having emphasis on EQ, or I put it this way, your personal relationship with others in your office and in the community. So as I mentioned to my young colleagues in the Jockey Club, that these days, 識人好過識字嚇, you really have to nurture your good relationship and build up your own network. And the important point is that you have to build up your network from the very beginning.
Hong Kong has long championed fair competition and meritocracy. Who would have thought that one day, in an official setting, favoritism and relationships over ability would be openly endorsed as an institutional norm? When dissenting and critical voices are silenced, while relationships, favoritism and submission to power are emphasized, society's mindset becomes increasingly one-dimensional. For some, this may be an ideal state, but it is certainly detrimental to a Hong Kong that needs to overcome its challenges.
以往回顧香港全年大事，主要集中關注發生喺香港嘅事，或者係外地涉及香港人嘅重大突發事件，好少會講到國際形勢或者係外國嘅政策。
以往國際社會都會尊重香港嘅高度自治，給予獨立自主嘅地位同待遇。而過去特區政府嘅對外政策面面俱圓，地緣政治變化帶嚟嘅風險唔算高，有時甚至發揮到緩衝嘅作用。
不過隨住香港過去幾年內在嘅變化，對外關係亦都採取唔同嘅態度，令到國際社會對香港嘅睇法同定位已經唔同咗。
作為外向型嘅經濟，同時亦都係中國對外一個主要嘅金融窗口。未來國際形勢嘅走向對於香港造成嘅影響，都會比以前更加直接、更加猛烈。唔係一句地緣政治更趨複雜就可以輕輕帶過。
At the end of November, the US State Department announced it would maintain its travel alert for citizens visiting Hong Kong at level 2. Exercise increased caution. It continued to state that Hong Kong's legal definitions of crimes are vague and apply to foreigners in Hong Kong and individuals outside of Hong Kong. Travelers to Hong Kong are urged to exercise extra caution. Since June 2020, when the National Security Law was enacted, the US has maintained this travel advisory. In September, the US also updated its 2021 Business Advisory. The new version was jointly issued by the State Department, Treasury Department, and Commerce Department, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Homeland Security. The advisory highlighted that risks previously faced in mainland China are now more frequently appearing in Hong Kong. The National Security Law and the Safeguarding National Security Ordinance, along with actions by Chinese and Hong Kong authorities, could negatively impact businesses' employees, finances, compliance, reputation, and operations. The advisory also noted that the relevant legal provisions are vague, potentially criminalizing routine activities such as lobbying, market analysis, due diligence, or accounting. These activities could be deemed criminal. This has significantly increased business risks in Hong Kong.
We're alarmed by the sweeping and what we interpret as vaguely defined provisions laid out in their Article 23 legislation. We think that this was fast-tracked through the non-democratically elected Legislative Council after a truncated public comment period. We also believe that a lot of the phrasing and crimes that are outlined are poorly defined and incredibly vague. They use phrases such as external interference, which is incredibly vague.
The updated business advisory also highlights, since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, Hong Kong has become a hub for Russia to evade Western sanctions. Mainland China and Hong Kong have become key transit points for dual-use products supporting Russia. These products aid Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. The advisory urged American businesses and individuals in Hong Kong to understand the related sanction risks. Since the National Security Law was implemented in 2020, the US has regarded Hong Kong as having lost its high degree of autonomy and become just another Chinese city. Under the US Hong Kong Policy Act, the US suspended Hong Kong's special status and treatment separate from mainland China. The policy remains in effect.
我哋必須認真學習，貫徹三中全會精神。
In fact, recent chief executive policy addresses show that Hong Kong's economic, financial, and external policies have been integrated into Beijing's central strategy, becoming an extension of national policy. As the US-led Western stance on China becomes increasingly hardline, Hong Kong, as China's key financial gateway to the world, is at the forefront of these tensions. In 2023, foreign media reported that following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Western countries and their allies implemented economic sanctions, including a ban on trading Russian gold. After these sanctions, Hong Kong became Russia's largest gold trading center. Although the Hong Kong government has not disclosed figures on Russian gold trading, in June, Hong Kong registered V-Power Finance Security was sanctioned for helping Russian gold mining companies transport gold overseas. It was placed on the US sanctions list. The London Bullion Market Association immediately revoked its membership. According to Reuters, V-Power imported over 20 tons of Russian gold. Later, media revealed that V-Power in Hong Kong had its majority shareholder, V-Power Security Guarding, renamed as Honesty Service Management Limited, and continued operations. In September, Russia's state media outlet Sputnik reported that Hong Kong's imports of Russian gold hit a record high in May, reaching 10.1 tons worth $750 million. In August, the amount of gold imported from Russia doubled to 8.4 tons, valued at $650 million. Russia thus became Hong Kong's fourth largest gold supplier, accounting for 12% of imports. This year, the US Treasury released its sanctions list, which repeatedly included Hong Kong companies. In the late October announcement, Hong Kong set a record with at least 28 companies accused of facilitating procurement and transportation for Russia, including military-use items such as electronic components. These companies were sanctioned by the US Treasury. This number exceeded that of the 11 mainland Chinese companies sanctioned during the same period. The Hong Kong government has consistently refused to enforce Western sanctions against Russia, stating it will only comply with sanctions authorized by the UN Security Council. It will not enforce unilateral sanctions from individual countries. However, Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council and holds veto power. Thus, sanctions against Russia cannot be passed in the Security Council. Beyond sanctions targeting Russia, US trade restrictions on China have also affected Hong Kong. In October, the US Treasury announced a ban on US individuals and companies investing in China, including Hong Kong and Macau, in sensitive sectors such as semiconductors, microelectronics, quantum information technology, and artificial intelligence. The US stated these sectors are critical to the development of military, surveillance, and intelligent technologies. Restricting these transactions aims to prevent these technologies from falling into the hands of those who threaten the US national security. This ban effectively cuts off US capital from investing in sensitive technologies in China and Hong Kong. It also impacts Hong Kong's recent push to develop innovation and technology. In November, PC Partner, the world's second-largest graphics card manufacturer, announced it would relocate its headquarters from Hong Kong to Singapore. The company would delist from Hong Kong and relist in Singapore. According to tech media reports, if PC Partner remained in Hong Kong, it would be unable to access NVIDIA's high-end GPU chips. As a result, the company decided to relocate to Singapore. At the same time, the group moved its graphics card production lines from China to Indonesia. Amid worsening economic and trade relations with the West, the Hong Kong government has followed Beijing's policy direction to strengthen ties with regions outside of the West, such as the Middle East, Belt and Road Initiative countries, and ASEAN countries seeking new opportunities. However, in the complex international geopolitical game, while forging new relationships, it may also bring new risks. In late November, the bipartisan leaders of the U.S. Congressional Select Committee on China sent a letter to U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. The letter claimed that Hong Kong has become a hub for violating U.S. trade sanctions, including exporting regulated Western technologies to Russia, setting up shell companies to purchase Iranian oil, and managing ghost ships serving the North Korean regime. The letter specifically mentioned that 40% of goods shipped from Hong Kong to Russia in 2023 were semiconductors and other military use materials. These goods could support Russia's continued invasion of Ukraine. The letter urged the US to reassess whether its current policies toward Hong Kong's financial and banking sectors are appropriate. It directly pointed at Hong Kong's financial system. Nikkei News quoted sources reporting that Jesse Baker, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the US Treasury's Office of Terrorist Financing and Financial Crimes, visited Hong Kong in early December. He met with representatives of several banks including HSBC, Standard Chartered and Bank of China. Sources stated that during the meetings, US officials warned Hong Kong banks not to engage in business dealings with Russia. Hong Kong Monetary Authority representatives were also present. Another challenge Hong Kong will face is the tougher stance on China expected from the new US administration set to take office in January 2025.
國際形勢、香港處境呢啲外在環境唔係個人可以改變到。
喺過去嘅一年，我哋見到有啲人因為處境變差或者遭遇打擊而否定自己嘅過去，任由環境去定義自己。
但係喺同樣嘅處境之下，亦都有人堅持信念，繼續去領會以往經歷帶俾自己嘅啟發，去探索未來嘅可能性。
一切取決於選擇。
低潮之下，我哋仍然見到移居台灣嘅香港記者陳卓思同黃紀堯執導嘅顏色摘取樣本 Doc-M Movie 贏得金馬獎最佳紀錄短片。
側寫近年社會嘅集體情緒，充滿香港獨有文化元素嘅電影《破地獄》橫掃亞太影展4個獎項。
身處轉變之中，會迫使你去思考乜嘢係最重要，乜嘢最值得珍惜。
有啲故事只屬於香港，只屬於香港人。
無論未來點樣會變落去，會面對點樣嘅環境，每個人都仍然有自由去誠實面對自己。有自由去拓闊未來嘅可能性。
踏入新嘅一年，香港將要進入另一章，但係呢個故事未寫完，香港人仍然可以繼續一齊寫落去。
祝願大家平安，活出自由。